Hey guys, Caesar here. I'm just amazed that I have 7 subscribers. That it feels awesome. I mean, I just started YouTubing and I know my videos, their quality is kind of but still. 7 subscribers, that's pretty cool. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. I would love that. Today we're gonna talk about UI buttons. I'm gonna show you guys how you create a UI button that has rounded corners on it. It adapts to tinting, of course, so whenever you change the tint of the button, you also change the tint of the border. And of course, the border will be 1 pixel, not 1 point. So it will be super sharp on iPhone 7 and iPhone 7 Plus. Doing lines on iOS that are really 1 pixel thin is something a lot of people forget to do. It looks a lot sharper, and yeah, I mean, you'll see how awesome it looks. These buttons will also support resizing. So, for example, if you support dynamic type, the button will just resize correctly. It will just work. We will also support dynamic type, which means that if the user changes the font sizes on his iOS device, the UI button will just resize correctly and the border as well. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's get started. The first thing we got to do is create a new Xcode project. So let's do that. There we go, create a new Xcode project. Let's just do a single view application. We don't need anything complicated for this demo. We'll call this product name Rounded Button. Yeah, that's enough. And oh, by the way, I will put this code on GitHub, and I'll put a link to this code in the show notes as well. So just feel free to download it, check it out, build it on your computer, and play with it. Okay, cool. So now the project is on. What we gotta do is we gotta create a new class. Swift file. Let's call it Rounded Button. There we go. There we go. That error should disappear. Oh yeah, we gotta import UIKit, of course. UIButton is not part of Foundation. Okay, so now we've subclassed UIButton. Let's go into the storyboard and put a UIButton object in there. Let's put it in the middle. There we go. And we have to say that it's the class Rounded Button. So sorry if I'm a bit quick. So what I did is I dragged the button out there, and then when it's activated or when it's selected, in the top right corner you have these 6 objects. You choose a third one, and then under class you write the class name. In this case it's Rounded Button. Oops, there we go. Great, so now this UI button is an instance of our own class. So let's go back to the code. We're going to override a function called awake from nib. And when you override a function, it's always super important to call the superclass, because you don't know what might be happening in there. So your only obligation is to call super.awake from nib. Great. So this function will be called when the object has been created. So in here we set our border. So layer.border width equals UI screen dot main screen dot native scale. And we want to divide 1 by that. So what this means is that the border width, if we do it like that, the border width will be 1 point. 1 point on a 2x screen is 2 pixels. On a 3x screens, like the 7 Plus for example, it's 3 pixels. So to get this line to always be 1 pixel, we just write 1 divided by, yeah, that was just what I just wrote. So we just write 1 divided by uiscreen.main.native scale. This will give us exactly the height of 1 pixel. So it will be super sharp. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is that we have to set the tint color of this border. You might do it in here, so you can just write layer dot border color equals UI color dot purple dot CG color. So this means that this button will now have a border that is 1 pixel and the color will be purple. Let's build this and see what happens. I'm just going to change, there we go. So we'll build to the simulator instead. Now we wait. There we go. Give it a few seconds to boot up. There we go. It now booted. Let's see here. So we should get a UI button. There we go. There's a UI button. First of all, you see it's not centered. We'll fix it. We'll get to that. Number 2, it has a purple border, which is awesome. Okay, so first of all, let's fix so the button is centered again. Let's go into a storyboard. There we go. And we just create constraints. I'll do that. I do this by holding in my control button and dragging from the button object to the view. Then I get this pop-up. And here we see center horizontally and center vertically. I hold in Shift so I can select both of them, and then I press Enter. Done. If I now select the button and go over here to the ruler, which is the 5th object in the right menu, I scroll down. Here I see the constraints this button has. And we see here that it's centered to both X and Y. Let's rebuild again, just to see that it's centered. There we go. Now it's centered. As you might see now that some of the border is missing. This is because the simulator has been scaled. If I press CMD1, now it's rendered in 1:1 pixels. So now we will always see it. On the other hand, we will have to scroll to be able to see the entire screen, but it's okay for now. We'll keep it like this so we get this 1:1 pixel on our screen. Okay, next up. So the border is really close to the edges of the text. We don't want that. We want some padding in there. To do that, we just go back to our class and we set the content inset on our button. There we go, content edge insets. We'll put the top to 0, the left to 16, the bottom to 0, and the right to 16. So this means that the button will now have padding on the left and right side of 16 points. There we go. That looks much better. Next up, we want this to have rounded corners. To do that, we just go into the code again and we write layer dot corner radius equals, let's do frame dot height divided by 2. Let's build now and see what happens. This should work, but it doesn't. So I have a hunch. I think I know why this happens. I think it is because the button has a specific height in the storyboard. So when it's loaded, we take that height and divide it by 2 to get really nice rounded corners. But then it changes height because it can be a million reasons. To fix this, we just override the function layout subviews. And we move this line we wrote, where we set the corner radius, we move that line down to layout subviews instead. Now it works. Every time this button changes height, the function layout subviews will be called and it will update the corner radius. So the corner radius will now always be nice and smooth. Great. The next issue we have is that the tint on the button, which is blue, is not the same as the border color. We want both of them to be the same. So to do that, we get back to the code. We take the line where we set the border color to purple, which is this line. So we cut that and we paste it into layout subviews. And instead of setting it to purple, purple, we set it to tint color.cg color. There we go. And now if we build again, this should work. Voila. So the border is now the same color as the button. So if we would in storyboard change the tint of this button to, no, not text color, tint color to, let's say red, for example. And build again. Yeah, the border updates as well. That's pretty awesome. Another issue we have is that if we take this button and disable it, there we go. So when you disable a button, per default, it gets gray. So let's rebuild this and I'll show you what happens. So what you see now is that we disabled this button, it made the button gray, but the border still stays red. This happens because the layout subviews function is called, and if we get back to the code, we just set the border color to whatever the tint color is. The tint color is still red, but still, since it isn't enabled, it's not going to render that tint color. Instead, it's going to be gray. So to fix this, we just have to check if the button is enabled or not. So let's do this in our inline if. Is enabled, and if enabled, if it's true, we'll return the tint color. If not, we'll return a gray color. Let's rebuild it and see if it works. There we go. Cool. As you might see, the gray colors are not spot on the same color, but that's a minor thing to fix. Another thing that we are going to support in this UIButton subclass is dynamic type. Dynamic type means that if the user changes the font size he wants to see on his iOS device, this UIButton will just grow or shrink automatically. So I'll show you how it's done on your device. You go into settings, you go into general, accessibility, larger text. As you drag this slider, you'll update the size you want to see in your apps. So, and if if you have an issue with seeing, if you're seeing impaired or whatever you call it, which is not funny by the way, shouldn't laugh. You enable this thing, and then you can drag it even further up. Okay, so for this demo, we're gonna keep it super high to start with. And if we rebuild our app, nothing's gonna happen. There we go. Nothing's happened, which means that we don't adapt to this setting. So how do we do that? Go into the storyboard. You select this button. You go into the middle icon, I think it is. Show the attributes inspector. Yeah. Click that button, and then under font, you click on the T, and under font dropdown, you choose one of these text styles. In our case, I think body would make total sense. Done. Okay, so if we rebuild now, this button should be ginormous. It works. It's alive. This is great. Okay, so what happens now if the app is running and the user adjusts this font size? Let's give it a try. Let's go back to settings. Let's drag it all the way down. Let's go back to our app. Nothing's happened. So how do we get that to work? Before iOS 10, you had to register for a notification. And when you got that notification, you had to update the font size on these labels and buttons and everywhere. In iOS 10, it's a lot easier. Let's go to our code, rounded button. And to get this working, we just have to call this property. title label. So it's a property on UI label. Adjusts font for, yeah, there we go. Adjusts font for category size. Adjusts font for content size category. And we set that to true. The default value is false, by the way. That's why nothing happened. Let's rebuild and see what happens. So the button should be small now. It is. That's great. And now we could go back to settings. We'll drag this all the way up to ginormous size. There we go. Now we have a big button. That's great. Of course, we can go back. We can drag it somewhere halfway. And it just works. Awesome. And that's how easy it is to create your own UIButton subclass that has borders, rounded corners, it updates correctly when it's disabled, and it conforms to a dynamic type. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or if anything was unclear, leave a comment, reach out on Twitter, or just find me on Facebook or something. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you love this video, subscribe to me using this button. And while you're at it, check out my latest app called Cooking. It's a recipe management app where all your recipes are stored in CloudKit. Okay guys, take care and see you next time. Bye bye.